Philippines, and good day world. It's Thursday, December 7, 2023, and you're watching Newsline World. I'm Jayne Codnita. We will bring you the top stories we've gathered from all over the globe. First, former palace official Atty. Salvador Panelo has a challenge to the House of Representatives after SMNI anchors Atty. and Dr. Badoy were cited in contempt during the recent congressional hearing on SMNI's franchise. U.S. Senate Republicans blocked the Ukraine and Israel aid bill over the dispute amid the surging number of immigrants in the United States. In the Israel-Hamas war, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israeli troops are surrounding the home of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Chinese President Xi Jinping met with EU leaders von der Leyen and Michel in Beijing for the EU-China summit. And Russian President Vladimir Putin received a warm welcome from UAE and Saudi Arabia in a rare regional visit. These and more for tonight's edition of Newsline World. Former palace official Atty. Salvador Panelo issued a challenge to the House of Representatives after Atty. and Dr. Badoy were cited in contempt, Angel Pastor reports.
After SMNI anchors Jeffrey Atty. and Dr. Badoy were cited in contempt by the House Committee on Franchise, Atty. Salvador Panelo is challenging the Congress to file cases against them.
Kamara de Representante, kayo naman tingnan nyo naman ang kalakaran ng inyong pinakulong. Ilagay nyo ang mga sarili nyo sa kanila. Mukhang hindi makatao yan. Siguro, tama na yung binigay niyo sila ng leksyon. At i-demanda nyo kung gusto nyo, kung talagang merong kasalanan. Para malaman natin kung meron ng kasalanan o wala. Sapagkat yun in the realm of speculation pa lang yan. Ang hukuman lang makakapagsabi kung ang ginawa nila ay labag sa batas.
Panelo strongly condemned the resolution filed in Congress to suspend SMNI's franchise.
Talagang ako, I'm reacting, I'm sorry to say, kaibigan natin yung naghahay ng resolution. Maling-mali, lalo-lalo pa, yung resolution na pinapaimbestiga ang SMNI and pending investigation, it should cease operations sus Mariosep. Gusto mo sabihin kung ang investigasyon nyo hanggang matapos ang mundo, hindi na makaka-operate ang SMNI. That again is a grave abuse of discretion. That is an attack on the freedom of the press. You are muzzling this network from doing its duty to the people.
The former Chief Presidential Legal Counsel also cautioned lawmakers not to involve SMNI's franchise in the issues faced by the two anchors.
Alam po ninyo, hindi maganda na idadamay nyo talaga ang network. Huwag nyong isama yan sapagkat yan ay magninitya ng protesta ng maraming mga kababayan natin. And we do not want to reach that point where there will be again upheaval in this country. Sawang-sawa na ho tayo dyan. So, kayo po maging mahinahon.
On the other hand, Atty. Panelo offered an advice to Atty. and Dr. Lorraine.
Okay na yung hunger strike for a few days, pero wag yung pabahay niyan sapagkat kailangan yung maging malakas. Pag humina kayo ng humina, hindi kayo kakain, paano pa? Paano nyo ipaglalaban ang inyong mga karapatan? Kailangan healthy rin kayo. It's enough that you have voiced your opposition and declare your principles in defense of your freedom to speak out at ang suporta ng mga taga-labas. Huwag nyo nang patayin ang inyong mga katawan sa pamamagitan ng matagalang hunger strike.
Atty. Panelo also has a reminder to lawmakers.
And those who have been given the mantle of power to govern this country, always ponder on the words. There is a saying, whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make man. Ang gustong ilaglag sa bangin ng mga Diyos ng tadhana ay nilalasing muna sa kapangyarihan.
For God and my beloved Philippines, Angel Pastor, SMNI News.
The Philippine National Police received that 6 national government agencies received bomb threats on December 5. However, according to the PNP, these were deemed false alerts. Paul Montibon has the details.
Nakipag-ugnayan na po yung ating PNP Anti-Cybercrime Group sa ating mga foreign counterparts para matrace po yung origin nitong email na ito.
The Philippine National Police Anti-Cybercrime Group is investigating the consecutive bomb threats against the country, particularly targeting national government agencies. On Tuesday, December 5, 2023, a supposed Japanese lawyer claimed to have planted bombs in various locations in Manila City Hall, prompting immediate notification to authorities to warn workers and residents near the area.
Nung isang araw po ay sunod-sunod po yung bomb threat na naitala po natin at yan naman po ay nirespondihan lahat po ng PNP at nakikiusap po tayo sa ating mga kababayan na mag-ingat po tayo doon sa mga tinatanggap po natin na mga email dahil itong mga bomb threat po na ito ay sinorse through the email.
Earlier, employees of the Department of Interior and Local Government or DILG building, where the National Police Commission or NAPOLCOM office in Quezon City is located, were disturbed due to the bomb threat. According to the PNP, the name provided in the email was fake. Still, they will continue to collaborate with the authorities to prevent such threats.
At base po sa ating investigation ay ito pong email na ito, lalong-lalo na po doon sa isang nagpapakilalang Takehiro Karasawa na isang di umanong Japanese lawyer ay fake po ito. At in fact, noong September and October ay meron din po tayong na-monitor through our cyber patrolling na paikot-ikot at paulit-ulit lamang po itong email na ito. At hindi lamang po ito limitado sa Pilipinas, meron din pong ganitong the same content po ng email sa South Korea, sa Taiwan, sa China.
The PNP warned the public against spreading bomb threats with a penalty of up to 5 years of imprisonment. The bomb threat emerged days after the deadly bombing incident at the gym of the Mindanao State University in Marawi City last Sunday, claiming the lives of 4 individuals. For God and my beloved Philippines, reporting Paul Montibon, SMNI News.
The Quezon City Regional Trial Court has handed down a guilty verdict to former Osama City Vice Mayor Nova Princess Parohinog for possessing over 677 grams of shabu in 2017. Margot Gonzalez reports.
Former Osama City Vice Mayor Nova Princess Parohinog has been sentenced to life imprisonment after being found guilty in a drug case by the Quezon City Regional Trial Court. To recall, more than 677 grams of shabu were seized from her residence in Barangay San Roque, Osama City during a raid conducted by authorities in 2017 as part of the Tetes administration's war on drugs campaign. Based on the 160-page decision of Judge Michel Manzanero Casino of Quezon City Regional Trial Court Branch 228, there is no doubt that Parohinog violated Republic Act 9165. No suspicious activities were found in the chain of custody of the confiscated shabu. The court also emphasized that the search warrant served during the operation was legitimate, with media and barangay officials present as witnesses when the warrant was read. Meanwhile, in addition to a life sentence, the court has ordered Parohinog to pay 500,000 pesos for her offense. The court also mandated Parohinog to be transferred from the Taguig City Jail Female Dormitory to the Correctional Institute for Women in Mandaluyong. The court has directed that the confiscated shabu from the accused be turned over to the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency or PDEA for proper disposal. For God and my beloved Philippines, this has been Margot Gonzalez, SMNI News.
European Union leaders are in Beijing for a summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping and other Chinese leaders for the 24th EU-China Summit. This report.
The European Union leaders are in Beijing for a summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping and other Chinese leaders for the 24th EU-China Summit. 24th EU-China Summit.
The 24th EU-China Summit is taking place in Beijing, China, which started on December 7. Among the EU leaders present in the event were President of the European Council, Michel, and President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, accompanied by High Representative Josep Borrell. During the meeting, she urged for enhanced political mutual trust, dialogue, and cooperation with EU. The Chinese president also said that China and the EU should provide greater stability for the world, a stronger impetus for development.
去年年底以来，两位主席先后来访，中欧战略、经贸、绿色、数字领域高层对话取得丰硕成果，中欧关系呈现巩固发展的良好势头。这符合双方利益和人民期待。中欧作为推动多极化的两大力量，支持全球化的两大市场，倡导多样性的两大文明。中欧关系关乎世界和平、稳定、繁荣。中欧有责任共同为世界提供更多稳定性，为发展提供更多推动力，为全球治理提供更多引领和支持。
Meanwhile, Michel and von der Leyen highlighted the importance of China-EU relations, especially the trade partnership.
Nous sommes heureux de vous rencontrer en personne et nous sommes unis pour être engagés dans la poursuite d'une relation stable et mutuellement profitable avec la Chine. L'Union européenne et la Chine sont d'importants partenaires commerciaux. Nous souhaitons établir des relations commerciales durables, équilibrées et équitables pour plus de prospérité pour nos populations respectives. Et nous maintenons notre position de reconnaissance de la One China Policy.
It's a pleasure to see you again and to be here in China for the second time this year. This speaks for the importance that the European Union attaches to its major relationship with China. China is the EU's most important trading partner. We have massive trade between us, 2.3 billion euros a day, and important investment stakes in each other's economies. And as major powers in the world, the European Union and China have global responsibilities.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Wednesday called for the sound, steady, and sustained development of China-U.S. relations during a phone conversation with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the latter's request. Shekinah Dikinya reports.
During the phone conversation between China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, the two sides exchanged views on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and agreed to maintain communication on the situation in the Middle East. Wang said China believes that the core of the solution is to respect Palestine's right to statehood and self-determination and embody the principle that Palestinians own, lead, and govern Palestine, adding that Beijing is willing to work with all parties to this end. Blinken meanwhile briefed on his recent visit to the Middle East and the U.S. view on the development of the situation, agreeing that the two-state solution should be implemented. The U.S. Secretary of State also underscored that the recent Houthi attacks against commercial vessels in the Red Sea pose an unacceptable threat to maritime security and international law that all nations have an obligation to uphold. Blinken also thanked Wang for visiting the United States Embassy in China to mourn the passing of former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. According to Wang, Kissinger had always advocated that China and the United States should respect each other, evolve together, and fulfill their due international responsibilities. Wang noted that Kissinger repeatedly stressed that the United States should fully understand the importance of the Taiwan question to China and the diplomatic legacy he left behind is worth carrying forward and developing by the later generations. The Chinese foreign minister also mentioned the successful meeting between President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden in San Francisco, which formed the San Francisco Vision for Future Development, which is of milestone significance. Wang noted that at present, the important task of the two sides is to continue the positive effects of the San Francisco summit, deliver on the consensus reached by the two heads of state, and consolidate the momentum of stability in China-U.S. relations. Wang reiterated China's solemn position on the Taiwan question, urging the United States not to interfere in China's internal affairs, not to support and connive with any forces of Taiwan independence. Reporting for Newsline World, Jayne Codnita, SMNI News.
North Korea once again attracted international attention. This time, it was not because of its head-turning missiles. This was after its leader, Kim Jong-un, asked women in his country to bear more children while wiping his tears. Kim Sang has the story.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un turned emotional as he called on women in his country's falling birth rates. In his recent speech, the North Korean leader was seen wiping his tears with a handkerchief as he urged thousands of North Korean women to have more babies to prevent a decline in birth rates. Some women in the crowd also turned emotional as the video went viral overnight. Kim Jong-un also thanked the mothers for their role in strengthening national power and reminded them that bearing children is important to carry forward the revolution and eliminate non-socialist practices. North Korea has a population of about 25 million people, which is smaller compared to its neighbor South Korea, which boasts nearly 52 million. Solely Sobugo Kim Sang, Imida, SMNI News, South Korea.
The U.S. military suspended the entire fleet of its Osprey V-22 helicopters a week after 8 Air Force personnel died in a crash off the coast of Japan. Ria Saito has the details.
The U.S. Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps took the initiative of grounding hundreds of aircraft after a deadly crash in Japan last week, indicating that the aircraft model involved in the incident suggested a material failure. A post by the Air Force Special Operations Command stated that the suspension of the CV-22 fleet took effect on December 6 in an effort to mitigate risk after a preliminary investigation indicated a potential material failure. The decision to ground its Osprey fleet comes a day after all 8 airmen who were aboard the CV-22 Osprey died when the military vehicle crashed off the southern Japanese island of Yakushima during a training flight on November 29th. The temporary suspension will provide enough space and time and for a thorough investigation. The fatal crash on November 29th was the second fatal incident for the Osprey this year, following a deadly crash in Australia that killed 3 Marines and injured 5 others in August. Meanwhile, 2 more accidents which involved MV-22B Osprey aircraft last year have killed 9 Marines. The U.S. military made the move a week after the Japanese military grounded its own Osprey fleet and called the U.S. military to do the same. Investigation continues to identify the root cause of the failure. Ijo nyong karasituloy news at Mashita, SMNI News, Japan.
Iran has launched a capsule into orbit carrying animals as part of the Islamic Republic's long-term goal to send humans to space. Milka Siddiq has the news.
An Iranian-made rocket with animals inside has soared into space earlier this week amid tensions with the West over the country's contested space program. The 500-kilogram capsule transported by a rocket named Salman is touted as the heaviest biological capsule to have been successfully launched by Iran in the history of its space program. The telecommunications minister said the capsule was launched 80 miles into orbit but did not disclose what kind of animals or how many of them were inside the capsule. Iran's interest in outer space dates back to 1957 but started its works of sending animals into space in the mid-2000s, with the first successful launch recorded in 2010. In 2013, the Islamic Republic successfully sent 2 monkeys named Aftab and Fargam into space and brought them safely back to Earth. Iran plans to send astronauts into space by 2029 after further tests involving animals proved to be successful. Reporting, this has been Melchizedek Cadiz, SMNI News, Kuwait.
Japanese Prime Minister Kishida has resigned as the head of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, following a political fund scandal involving his party. The LDP is currently facing various criticisms after Kishida's group failed to report the amount collected from political fundraising parties and whether the additional earnings were distributed as kickbacks to some lawmakers. Before Kishida's resignation, several previous leaders of their faction stepped down during their term as prime minister to avoid the emergence of such issues. To address the scandal, Kishida instructed the LDP executives on Wednesday to refrain from hosting fundraising parties. However, calls for the prime minister to leave his position have increased to restore public trust in the ruling party. Due to the involvement in the scandal, the cabinet's approval rating has plummeted to its lowest level since Kishida assumed the position of prime minister. Just this week, the controversy surrounding the Unification Church was deferred after reports surfaced that Kishida held a meeting with senior figures of the organization in 2019, as revealed by Japanese Daily. The death toll from a catastrophic volcanic eruption in Indonesia has increased to 23. Anissa de Guzman has the news.
Rescuers found the body of the last climber declared missing as they searched the hazardous slopes of Mount Merapi, Indonesia's most active volcano. About 75 climbers were making their way up to the top of the nearly 9,500-foot volcano when it erupted on Sunday. The active stratovolcano situated in West Sumatra spewed a thick plume of toxic ash and smoke as high as nearly 10,000 feet or taller than the volcano itself. The sky turned dark as the falling ash blocked the sunlight and spread to nearby villages. Mount Merapi, which means mountain of fire, is one of the most active volcanoes in the world and has erupted regularly since 1548. Hundreds of rescuers have worked tirelessly for days to find all missing hikers this week. Di siya Anissa de Guzman, Rangancha Contempt Mahanakon, SMNI News, Pratatay, Sawadika.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that it's only a matter of time before the Israeli forces find Yahya Sinwar, the de facto leader of Hamas. Andrea Santos reports.
Hours after the Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, confirmed that it launched a combined attack on the city of Khan Yunis against Hamas, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that they would wipe out the entire terror organization. Netanyahu earlier said, quote, "Last night I said that our forces could go anywhere in the Gaza Strip. They are currently surrounding Sinwar's house. His home is not his castle, and he can flee, but it is only a matter of time until we find him." End of quote. Hamas's Gaza chief Yahya Sinwar is believed to live in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Sinwar is a founding member of Hamas who grew up in a refugee camp of Khan Yunis. Meanwhile, during a press briefing, IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari was asked if the Israeli Prime Minister's statement meant that Israeli forces were closing in on Sinwar's home. As per The Guardian, Hagari replied, quote, "Sinwar is not above ground, he is underground. I don't want to elaborate where and how and what we know in terms of intelligence. This is not a place to talk about such things in the media. Our job is to find Sinwar and kill him." End of quote. To recall, on October, IDF International spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht told journalists that Sinwar and his entire command team were in Israel's sights. According to Hecht, Hamas leader Sinwar was the architect behind the October 7 terror attacks on Israel. Meanwhile, Netanyahu also stated that Israel is pressing to allow the Red Cross to visit their hostages. The Israeli Prime Minister also said he spoke with the president of the Red Cross again. Netanyahu said, quote, "I spoke with the president of the Red Cross again today, and I told her to turn to Qatar since it has been proven that they have leverage over Hamas, and demand Red Cross visits with our hostages and, of course, the providing of medicines for them." End of quote. Reporting, this has been Andrea Santos, SMNI News.
The government of Thailand confirmed that 8 Thai hostages remain under the captivity of the Palestinian militant group Hamas. Chatmongkon Pisamay Guson has the news.
Thailand's Ministry of Affairs expressed hope that the remaining Thai hostages captured by Hamas will be released soon as efforts to secure their freedom continue.
The ministry confirmed that the number of hostages remains at 8 after one missing Thai thought to be under captivity was found safe in Israel. Authorities were able to confirm his whereabouts after the missing Thai contacted his relatives in Thailand to assure them he was safe. Thai Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin earlier assured that efforts to release the remaining hostages go on and could happen during the next ceasefire. However, the Foreign Affairs Minister said that the chances of a second ceasefire are slim.
About 9,000 Thais have been repatriated to Israel, while some 20,000 others have shown no intention to come home. รายงานจากราชบุรี นายชัดมงคลพิสมัยโกศล SMNI ประเทศไทย สวัสดีครับ
U.S. Senate Republicans blocked the White House's request for billions of dollars in emergency aid for Ukraine and Israel as they continue. This comes as Republicans continue to push for immigration reforms in the country. Carlo de la Peña reports.
In the United States, a $110.5 billion spending package proposed by the White House failed to pass in the Senate, falling short of the 60 votes that they need to proceed. The final vote was 49 in favor and 51 against. The package would provide about $60 billion in security aid for Ukraine, including funds for economic and humanitarian aid for the Ukrainian government. It also includes $14 billion for Israel amid its war with Hamas. But Republican senators voted against the bill, alongside Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders, who opposed the move to provide aid to Israel. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, a New York Democrat, also voted no. But according to The Hill, Schumer failed his vote to no so he could bring the said bill up again in the future. To recall, the White House originally requested $105 billion in emergency supplemental national security funding in October, choosing to bundle the aid to Ukraine with money for Taiwan, Israel, and border security. However, the House insisted on dealing with the issues via separate appropriations bill, to which the Senate refused. It can be noted that the House is dominated by the GOP, while the Senate is dominated by Democrats. Earlier, U.S. President Joe Biden urged the Senate to approve the bill. He also claimed that Republicans wanted to, quote-unquote, literally kneecap Ukraine on the battlefield and damage our national security in the process.
They're willing to literally kneecap Ukraine and damage our national security in the process. Look, I know we have our divisions at home. Let's get past them. This is critical. Petty, partisan, angry politics can't get in the way of our responsibility as a leading nation in the world. And literally, the entire world is watching. The entire world is watching. What will the United States do? And think if we don't support Ukraine, what's the rest of the world going to do? What's Japan going to do, which is supporting Ukraine now? What's going to happen in terms of the G7? What's going to happen in terms of our NATO allies? What are they going to do?
Meanwhile, speaking ahead of voting, Senator Schumer called on Republicans not to join what he calls the hard right, which he claimed was using the border issue as nothing more than an excuse to kill the funding for Ukraine. But Republicans argued that the Democrats were not taking their concerns seriously enough. According to House Speaker and Louisiana Republican Mike Johnson, more than 6.5 billion people have crossed the border illegally since President Biden took office, and this includes almost 300 on the terror watch list. Reporting, this has been Carlo de la Peña, SMNI News.
Meanwhile, Russia's top diplomat in the United States responded to the Washington claims that Russian President Vladimir Putin may attack NATO unless the U.S. Congress allocates billions of dollars in additional funding for Ukraine. According to Russian ambassador to the U.S. Anatoly Antonov, such things are just boogeyman stories. To recall, in a recent press conference, U.S. President Joe Biden mentioned Putin while making an appeal to American lawmakers to appropriate assistance to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan.
Because we know Congress needs to pass supplemental funding for Ukraine before they break for the holiday resources. Simple as that. Frankly, I think it's stunning that we've gotten to this point in the first place. While Congress, Republicans in Congress are willing to give Putin the greatest gift he could hope for and abandon our global leadership, not just Ukraine, but beyond that. Putin attacks a NATO ally. If he keeps going, and then he attacks a NATO ally, where we've committed as a NATO member that we defend every inch of NATO territory, then we'll have something that we don't seek and that we don't have today. American troops fighting Russian troops. American troops.
But Antonov called this a myth-making and propagation of dangerous lies about this country. In a statement posted by the Russian embassy in the U.S., Antonov said, and quotes, "In an attempt to add fuel to the fire of the Ukrainian proxy war, U.S. authorities have finally lost touch with reality. Washington and the insatiable U.S. military-industrial complex are direct beneficiaries of the bloodshed in Ukraine," end of quote. To recall, on Wednesday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia is still ready for peace talks with Ukraine and that his country has never rejected such an option. Peskov also reiterated that it was Ukraine that withdrew from the talks in the spring of 2022. Kyiv, however, has ruled out any negotiations. Last year, President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a decree banning any talks with the current leadership of the Kremlin. Both Russia and Ukraine have their own peace plan, and they both rejected each other's proposal. The president of Russia received a warm welcome as he traveled to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates for a diplomatic visit this week. Trisha Molina reports.
Russian President Vladimir Putin made a visit to the Gulf region for the first time since the Russia-Ukraine war erupted in February 2022. Putin visited the United Arab Emirates on Wednesday before departing for Saudi Arabia. While in Abu Dhabi, the Russian leader was welcomed with a flyby of UAE military jets that featured the colors of the Russian flag, as well as a full cavalry escort and motorcade. A 21-gun salute was also held in his honor. Some high-ranking officials met him as he descended from his plane. Putin also held talks with the President of the United Arab Emirates, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Both leaders discussed ways to strengthen relations between the UAE and Russia and the need to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. Sheikh Mohammed even called Putin as his dear friend. After a short visit to the UAE, the Russian leader traveled to Saudi Arabia on the same day, where he was greeted by high-ranking Saudi officials. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman warmly received the President of the Russian Federation and held a meeting at Al Yamama Palace in the Saudi capital of Riyadh. The Crown Prince praised their bilateral ties and said that their countries are working on together for the benefit of Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the Middle East. Putin even invited the Crown Prince to visit Moscow during their meeting. Meanwhile, Putin is scheduled to meet Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi on Thursday to discuss the war in Gaza. Both the UAE and Saudi Arabia are key trading partners of Russia. The three countries are also part of a regional bloc of major oil exporting nations known as the OPEC+. Reporting for Newsline World, this has been Trisha Molina, SMNI News.
Brazil has strengthened its military presence along its border with Venezuela. Troops were deployed due to rising tensions between Venezuela and Guyana as part of their decades-old dispute concerning the oil-rich Essequibo region. Natalia Prado reports.
Tensions have been rising since Venezuela held a referendum on Sunday, wherein more than 95% of voters supported the government's call to claim Essequibo. Brazilian army trucks were seen making their way to Pacaraima, which borders Venezuela and Guyana. Hundreds of Brazilian troops were deployed and dozens of armed vehicles were stationed at the borders with Venezuela, in fears of a possible invasion of the disputed Essequibo region. Essequibo, also known as Guyana Essequiba or Essequibo, has been a subject of territorial dispute since 1830s. The territory measures 160,000 kilometers and has estimated 125,000 inhabitants. Venezuela believes that the Essequibo region was unjustly taken from them by the meddling foreign powers when Britain occupied Guyana and declared it a British colony in 1831. Guyana condemned Venezuela's referendum as an attempt of a possible annexation and warned to reach out the allies and region partners, such as the United States, to protect itself. Guyana maintains that the land has been part of their country for almost 200 years and stands ready to defend it. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio da Silva urged Venezuela and Guyana to avoid conflict over Essequibo. Lula also called on Venezuela not to occupy the disputed territory by force. Reporting for Newsline World, Natalia Prado, SMNI News.
Australia has finally announced the name for the country's first lunar rover following a public vote to name the space vehicle. Sasha Hassa reports.
Less than 3 years before Australia plans to launch its first lunar rover to the moon, the country has already selected a name for the space vehicle as it prepares to make history in the global space industry. After nearly 2 weeks of public vote, the name rover was chosen from more than 8,000 entries submitted to Australia's rover naming competition. The Australian Space Agency plans to launch the semi-autonomous rover to the moon as early as 2026, in partnership with NASA's robotic and human moon exploration project known as the Artemis program. Almost 20,000 Australians joined the public vote held between the 20th of November and December 1st. The space vehicle will weigh approximately 20 kilograms or about the size of a check-in suitcase. The lunar rover is expected to operate for 14 Earth days and collect lunar soil samples from which NASA will attempt to extract oxygen. Oxygen is critical not only for rocket fuel, but also to help sustain any future permanent base on the surface of the moon for future explorations. Reporting from Sydney, this has been Sasha Hassa, SMNI News, Australia.
And before we end, may you be inspired with the message of the appointed Son of God. When you sacrifice for notable cause, the Father will prosper you. And for our Christmas countdown, it's only 17 days to go before Christmas. And that's all for today's edition of Newsline World. For more news update, you may visit SMNINewsChannel.com or follow us on our official social media accounts on Rumble, Facebook, and Twitter. For God and my beloved country, the Philippines, I'm Jayne Codnita. Thank you for watching Newsline World, and thank you to our beloved Pastor Apollo C. Kibuloy, for the opportunity to be a part of this program. May you continue to listen to SMNI as it delivers nothing but fair, truthful, and balanced news, because SMNI is your source of credible news.